often refer to the title of my sermon, but this morning, making all new things. And I capitalized new, all new. Because that's a very important word in our society, important word in our capitalist market is new things. And we have the privilege this morning of several selections, our readings, that emphasize newness. Right? And we jump right in there with, well, first of all, Peter in Acts. He's got this whole new thing that God's trying to show him, where he's already seen the way that Jesus interacts with Gentiles, the way he wants to bless people no matter what nation they're from. And Peter is still struggling to get it a little bit. So God gives him this vision to say, hey, I need you to have a new perspective. Not this old perspective of, well, there's these nationalistic, all of these boundaries and borders of how we should be divvying people up between us and them. I want you to be a blessing to the whole world. Just like your ancestor Abraham was chosen in order, not simply, that's what we focus on, to give birth to a nation, but in order so that he might bless the entire world. And that's a new idea to Peter. He wasn't used to that. So the newness there, and then we jump into Revelation, and right off the bat, a new heaven and a new earth. Because the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. And so I think we in our market capitalist mindsets tend to think, well, that was the 1.0, and now we've replaced it with the 2.0. It's like the iPhone 19 or whatever it's on. I don't have an iPhone. I'm an Android guy, so I don't even know where you all are at. But you don't have to go back very far in those iPhone versions before it's just trash, right? Like what, an iPhone 11 is like a doorstop now or something? Because that's how we think. When we see new, we say, all right, let's chuck the old. Let's get rid of that because something new is here, something better is here. And the landfills know it. Right? The landfills are full of the things that were brand new and awesome and shiny with all of the bells and whistles just a couple of years ago. And I could say partly that's because technologically we are very advanced as a society and we just keep coming up with new ideas. And I wish I could pin it on that. But I think it has more to do with what's happening in here. I don't think we have a whole lot of commitment to the old. I think we're so ready to get rid of what's old because we're like, well, it's got problems. Let's not mess with that. Let's just kind of get rid of it, start with a blank slate. If what's new is good, and what's old, it's out. And it kind of reminds me of how we were looking for a house just a year and a half ago. We were deciding, okay, we're moving out of this apartment that we live in downtown, and we're going to live in a house. And what kind of house should we live in? Now, a lot of this conversation happened long before this too. Our mind was set in a lot of ways on where we were going to live, what kind of house we were going to buy. But when you look at the options that are out there, it's not just Zillow.com. There's a whole history to it. There's a whole societal movement behind it. Why do we have the kind of options that we have with housing? We could live in a brand new apartment or condo or a brand new house, or we could live in the suburbs in a kind of new house or a little bit older. We could live in the city in a very old house. And we were very intentional about looking at why did all of this come about the way that it did? Why do we have a metro area that has these large sections of depressed neighborhoods in the middle? And outside of that, you have kind of your maybe lower to middle class, and then at the edges are all of the wealth and the newness, oldness in the middle and newness at the edges. And now if you've studied at all the history of redlining, you can see the way that race is factored into that. And I'm not going to go very deep into that, but it's important to note how white people, when they felt like when desegregation was happening and felt like it was going to ruin them to have people of color moving into their neighborhood. Some of them were just straight up racists, Klansmen, who knows what. But others were open to being friends with people of color, but were terrified that their net worth was going to be zeroed out as a result of a person of color moving into their neighborhood. And maybe they were right about that, and maybe not, but the result is the same: white flight. It was an abandonment of all of the riches, all of the infrastructure, all of the cultural investment in what was at the heart of our city. Just wholesale abandonment to the edges. And I think there's a spiritual reality that goes way beyond city theory and development patterns and migration patterns, and even beyond racism, but that speaks to our hearts and what we do with a thing when we're afraid that its worth is gone, when we're afraid that its value has been sapped. Do we abandon that thing and try to move on to the new? Or do we work within the heart of Christ and what I see here to restore? And this is not patting ourselves on the back, but that's the direction that we wanted to go when we bought a house. And we bought a house built in 1905 in South Hyde Park in Kansas City, Midtown area. And we're not restorationists. We don't know how to do all that stuff. So a lot of it had been done for us when we got there, but there was still a lot that hadn't been done. It was not flipped for us. So we live in a house that's got a lot of awkward angles and a lot of why did they do that? That's so weird. And so I learned how to do some things for myself again. I replaced all of the outlets in the house, and I replaced all of the light switches and installed some ceiling fans, and didn't get electrocuted even once. So congratulate me. Last time I did that for a house, I got electrocuted twice. So this was an improvement. And I got the shovel out and moved dirt around in the backyard and tried to plant some things and did the best that I could. But even now, this weekend, I went down into the basement after the kids were in bed to get something, but I just decided to look around at all of the little curiosities, all of the deprecated things, and all of the, what was that ever used for right there? And this was obviously a DIY project by somebody that should not be doing DIY projects. And it's like a museum down there of abandoned utilities and crazy stuff. And it occurred to me, I think that's what we often see when we look inside ourselves. Is we see the orphan systems, we see all of the leftover junk, all of the things that we tried once and then abandoned and gave up on, saying that we would come back to that. Think of all the goals you've ever set, all of the New Year's resolutions you've ever made, and how long those lasted. I make a point not to go back and read in my journal what I've written in the past because it's depressing. I'm like, I had so much hope in that thing that I was doing. Or I see where I journaled for like 9 days in a row and then just completely stopped. I'm like, yep, it looks like my basement. But when we read Jesus' words, and we read the words of John in Revelation, and looking at what God is doing now and what God will do in the end, God does not abandon anything. A new heaven and a new earth is not the iPhone 19 or whatever it is. It is the same heaven and earth. And when it says the first heaven, the first earth had passed away, they didn't go on the junk heap. They didn't go in the dumpster. It's the mode, the system of the first earth and the first heaven have passed away. All of that, all the garbage worldview, all the garbage shamefulness, all of the dualism and the us versus them of that first earth, that is what has passed away and been replaced with something new. Same heaven, same earth, restored. And what God is doing with heaven and what God is doing with earth, more importantly, God is doing with us. And I think that's best summed up in what Jesus says to his disciples here in John 13. He is getting real with them. This story of Jesus on earth is coming to a conclusion. And he says, look, I'm not mincing words anymore. You've heard me give you commandments. You've heard me give you wisdom. And most of this has been culled from the Hebrew Scriptures, from all of the wisdom that you've already known up to this point, and I'm just trying to sort of package it for you. But then he says, now I'm going to give you a new commandment. Love one another. But you're like, wait, that's not new either. He's been saying that too. He said, love your neighbor as yourself, right? That's love one another. What's new about that? But Jesus is doing what God always does. Takes something of great value that we might have abandoned and said, we can't do it. Yeah, Moses said, love your neighbor, and we've had all of these centuries, and we can't do it. Look at us, we're failures. So what's new? He says, love one another just as I have loved you. That's new. He said, you've had this commandment all of these centuries and you couldn't do it. Maybe you just needed an example. Maybe you just needed to see it done. And so my coming down and being and walking on this earth, making my home with you, that's new. Don't just love one another. Don't just try to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do the best you can to love one another. Look at me. Look at Jesus. And the way that he loves us for exactly who we are. But he doesn't want to leave us the way we are. He loves us like we love this house that we bought. We were so thrilled when we bought it. We loved it from the first moment. But we loved it enough to keep working at it. And Jesus is the first to admit it's going to be work. And he worked hard and he gave his life to show us just what love looks like. That if it's true love, it's not easy. In fact, it's not love at all until it's hard. And this is how we make ourselves new. This is how we help make each other new. And this is how we see a new heaven and a new earth come about, is loving one another in the way that Jesus loved us. Amen.